It's just 2 days to Malaysia's 15th general election. Campaigning is in full swing across the country, with tough battles expected for those ballots. Now, in the midst of all that action is CNA's Lok Wei Su. She's now standing by in the capital, Kuala Lumpur. Wei Su, it's over to you.
And thank you, Dawn. Let's take a look now. The rise of social media has made it an essential tool for political campaigns in Malaysia. The country's internet penetration rate stands at 96.8%. And with nearly 6 million new voters this year, politicians are going online to woo young Malaysians. But as CNA's Tan Si-hui finds out, views, likes and shares may not necessarily lead to more votes at the ballot box come Saturday.
Voice is gold and power. So one day of voting will determine the future of a country for the next 5 years.
That video alone has amassed some 400,000 views on politician Syed Saddiq's TikTok page, and that's the kind of reach he's hoping to get this general election.
The fact that for the very first time, about 40% of voters were on the fence is the largest ever in any election. I think now they want to see a more positive campaign. So really it's about adapting policies and explaining in a very fun way. It's about edutainment, education with entertainment combined.
With more than 800,000 followers on his page, the incumbent Muar seat is proficient in using social media tools for campaigning purposes. But he's gained some serious competition on TikTok.
Dalam negara kita hanya orang politik saja yang boleh berpolitik.
I think perhaps this is the first time we're seeing a short video platform being used extensively in the campaign. In the past, perhaps politicians were forced to upload longer videos on the more traditional platforms. So short videos probably attract younger voters.
There's a 30% increase in new voters after the voting age lowered to 18. And these videos help to simplify messages for first-time voters. One Barisan Nasional candidate is hoping to leverage all of his 125,000 followers on Facebook. That's especially since he's competing in a seat that's a Pakatan Harapan stronghold.
And I always say to our people that this is the new battleground because like in Shah Alam, for example, this constitution has about 165,000 voters. You can't do physical campaigning to reach out to 165,000 voters, so you have to use social media. So I suppose there's no guarantee that those postings are going to translate into votes, but we have to try.
Analysts warn that more views may not necessarily equate to more votes, as speeches that candidates make to supporters won't win any more votes. Other important segments of the population may also be left out of the digital game.
Well, I guess it depends on their target voters, right? I guess for parties that solely operate or relying on older rural voters, online presence doesn't really matter.
It's difficult to spot young faces at physical rallies like this, or charamas as they call them. But politicians say such charamas still play an important role so that voters can recognize them when they hit the ground running. Yet, physical and online worlds need not stay mutually exclusive with the use of live streaming at such rallies. Tan Si-hui, CNA, Kuala Lumpur.
And Dr. Pauline Leong joins us now. She's Associate Professor of Communication at Sunway University, Malaysia. Oh, Professor Leong, now all this talk of lowering the minimum age for voting is actually years in the making. If you look back, the passing of the amendment bill in 2019, that had unusually wide bipartisan support. At that point, there was genuine celebration that this was real electoral reform. This was giving young people a much-needed political voice. Did it pan out that way?
I think that there was genuine interest and genuine excitement, that youth finally have a chance to vote, and at a lower age. I think that is something that we can celebrate. But of course, right now when we see it, right, youths, you are giving them a right to vote, but has there been enough political education, political literacy for them to actually understand the importance of the vote? Based on the 2020 Youth Development Index, Malaysia actually ranks one of the lowest in the region for youth political and civic engagement, which is usually an indicator of voting inclination. So what I find is that a lot of young first-time voters have little sufficient support to understand, the voting system, the parties as well. And it doesn't help that this round there's a lot of 4 to 5 corner and many, contestants, in the political arena. So that really confuses the whole situation. And so therefore, it is, for them, it's confusing.
So this is where, I suppose, for political leaders very eager to get votes, social media helps because it's an easy, attractive way to get immediate attention in a world, let's face it, we are riddled with distraction.
Yep, correct. So therefore, right, to reach the young people, social media is a tool, because based on, the lockdown especially, where we live our lives basically through social media, we order food, and also the students, they use social media to study. Right, so they're so used to the system where everything's on social media. So to reach them, definitely you need to use social media to create the hype as well. To sort of get them interested in that sense.
Well, I use the word hype, and that's interesting because hype is necessarily something fairly hollow. When hype meets real life, so social media builds up all your expectations. I think you have mentioned this, the sea change of 2018, the huge excitement, enthusiasm that greeted the change of government. And then we had the Sheraton move, and again you have mentioned disenchantment and confusion. Social media, is there any way for it to be a more sustained effort to educate people, to really change minds, build resilience, to buffer against, well, it's real life?
I think that social media, I think a lot of people think that social media is the be-all and end-all. It's not the solution, I would say. I would say that social media is a gateway to enter into the people's lives, especially the young people. It's a start. Right, but to sustain it, you need to have constant use of social media and also to follow up with ground action. Like for example, right, during the COVID-19 lockdown, we had a lot of social media campaigns. Like Kita Jaga Kita, and these were hashtag campaigns that started off online, but went off to offline, where people actually gathered like food banks, etc. So it has to be a concerted effort between online and offline for it to actually take action and have some fruition.
I'd like to take this discussion beyond just young voters, because a lot of chatter about the 18 to 21-year-olds or 18 to 20-year-olds, but in fact, that amendment was just one of 2 major changes. The other one was AVR, automatic voter registration, which enabled people to be automatically registered whatever their age. And this number is much larger. It's 4.87 million. Young voters, just 1.2 to 1.4 million. So this very large number of entrenched non-voters. Now, you work with devising social media campaigns. You teach about it. If you had to come up with a social media campaign that brought these recalcitrant non-voters back to the table, to the ballot box, how would you advise it?
I think that you're right. A lot of people have been focusing on the young people, the 18 to 21-year-olds, but we've forgotten this group of people who are apathetic. They had a chance to register, but they did not. So in order to sort of entice them back to vote, we actually have to educate in the first place. Why is the vote important? How is it relevant to their daily lives? When they see the connection between what their vote as well as what happens to them, their pockets, for example, that would be the first step. So with that education, with the awareness, then you have to do the emotional appeal. Sort of like help them to understand and get them excited, and have emotions. And once they feel that there is something there's a change, or that I need to say something, and then they say it through the vote, I think that's it. Emotional appeal would be the next stage.
All right. I think maybe we can draw lessons from, again, you were discussing this earlier, a very successful movement that started as a social media campaign. That's, of course, Bersih, the movement for clean and fair elections. That started for electoral reform. It then expanded into opposing corruption, opposing authoritarianism. Bersih, any lessons we can draw from that? Final question.
Okay, from Bersih, right, I've observed that in the past, it started off as a social media campaign. It built up the hype, but from the hype, right, it actually connected with ground people, as in people actually connected by social media and to go on the ground. So there is a connection there. You need to get people's awareness. And when I did my research on Bersih too, especially in the early days, there were young people who actually found out about Bersih through scrolling through social media. So from there, they connected with friends, they went further and they researched further, and that's where they decided that, hey, maybe it's time to say something about electoral reform. So I think that is, social media is not the be-all and end-all, but it is a start and it is a gateway to further things that you can do with it.
So a call for action then?
Yeah, I think that for voters, I think you have to, especially for political parties, you need to look at social media as a tool and use it effectively to, perhaps educate. I think most important is to educate people through social media.
All right, thanks so much for that. Professor Pauline Leong, she's Associate Professor of Communication at Sunway University, Malaysia.